Oh, I don't even know if I have my Discord audio or my audio working properly, but let's just assume I do. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of the renamed, rebranded Ashtalkie with your host, Ninja,
That's me.
and your lovely co host, really just the guy with a platform and nothing better to do on a Sunday. The treatment. Uh, yeah, I got terrible overhead lighting. I have not prepared for this today at all. What's up? How's it going?
It's going well. I don't do any of the preparation for the stream itself. I just come with the right attitude. I don't know.
Yeah.
With the ashes brain. It's all I'm on ashes.
Well, it's good that one of us has an Ashes brain.
Every time I get fed up with ashes, which happens all the time, I then about 24 hours later, I'm thinking about my next game of ashes again.
Right.
So it's a good cycle. And I think the community helps a lot with that, with the fact that some of our most competitive players are also some of not like, oh, they are nicer than other players, but I mean, we have nice players that are also very competitive, and so anytime I get salty about a loss, everyone's always so nice, and then I regain, as they say.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we have a guy that we always call Nice Guy Brian. So,
Yeah, that's
and
true.
he's one of the greats. So last week we talked about or 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, sometime ago, we talked about Silver Paladin. Has your stance on it changed at all?
No, I think Silver Paladin should be gone. I'm waiting. I don't think it's realistic to get Silver Paladin out before collection. I think this is the Silver Paladin year, though it hasn't been out for that long. I definitely predict some Silver Paladins for collection. Our big end of year tournament. It's invite only. You have to qualify for it. There's a bunch of different ways of qualifying. For different kinds of players, different people who are able to get in different ways. And then there's so many tournaments that we have that are available to everyone that it doesn't seem too mean to sometimes to have this one tournament where you have to actually qualify, especially considering how small our community is. But anyway, the point is, I definitely expect to see some Paladin at this tournament. I'm trying very, very hard not to post and complain about Silver Paladin over and over again, because I tend to do that with cards. But I'm very sad because the cards that I want to go, all right, are not chained. Everyone is fine with them. They exist. Realm Walker, everyone's happy. Golden Veil chained.
Yeah.
Apparently that's appeasing the masses. And then Molten Gold gets banned, which is like my little card, my little pet card. I mean, obviously everyone was playing it. I'm not going to pretend that I was unique.
But it was your
regard.
pet card, yeah.
It was Brankus. Brankus and I, we definitely got that card banned. I feel like that's not necessarily an overstatement, though. Of course, did we get it banned because was it really the fact that everyone else started to play it as well? Like people like Carl won a tournament by playing Molten Gold against people, and I think that was when people were saying like, okay, if everyone's using Molten Gold, maybe it's a problem. It's not just Ninja and Brankus. I think everyone is playing Silver Paladin, and therefore maybe it's worth looking at.
Yeah. Well, sure. if you had to ask, hey Shadow, what's up? And Mistreatment is also in the chat.
Nice.
I mean, what's interesting is that you and we talked about Silver Paladin, but I know that I think Carl, at least, and perhaps Brian, are of the opinion that the real power or I don't want to say underlying issue, because not everyone thinks Paladin's an issue, but the real power behind it is Royal Charm. It's the glue that has pulled all these pieces together that that have existed for a long time, Ruby Cobra and all these other things, but it's the piece that really made Paladin shine and made strategies that work with it very popular in the last what 6 months. So, which is interesting because it used to
It's
be, at least when I
definitely.
started, was a almost garbage tier card.
I think Royal Paladin was definitely not even garbage tier before people found ways of exploiting it with the Shimmer Wing. That was like the start point of it. Was like, okay, we can use Royal Paladin, sorry, not Royal Charm, sorry, to
That's what it
get
should be
out
called, though.
the
That's, you know how we had Value Town.
Royal
It
Paladin.
should be called
Yeah,
Royal Paladin. That's the new.
Royal Paladin.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. That's a slip up that does reflect the meta a bit. Yeah, I mean that's a good point. If you take away the Royal Charm from the Shimmer Wing is definitely still playable in my opinion.
Hmm.
Even though it costs you the extra dice, you're definitely, if you can trigger it, you're definitely still going to want to do that, even for the extra, for 2 dice instead of one,
Right.
to bring out to kill something and bring out the flame, the big phoenix 3/3. I think for the Royal Charm Paladin, is that really the only reason that it's powerful? Maybe the reason it's meta warping, because you can't play around it. You
Hmm.
can't say I'm going to play this. I'm not going to play rather this one attack low attack unit because I know it's vulnerable to the paladin. Um, because the royal charm means that the only space that exists is like a 3/2 2 dice summon that can technically get hit by the insane regress paladin,
Yep.
but it's not as many dice as the knight that you want to play before the regress paladin. I'm not sure about that though, because okay, regress paladin is one thing. You can definitely play around it. We kind of established that, I think, in our last chat, that like regress, that's 5 dice. You can definitely stall out and force your opponent to play the paladin before you get your knight down. I think that you might be onto something with the Royal Paladin being the real problem.
Yeah, it's when what I was referring to is I wasn't even thinking of actually about Shimmerwing into Eternity Flame for Royal Charm, but I just meant when I started playing the game. I guess it's like 3 years ago
Yeah,
now. Royal Charm was just, yeah, a non-starter,
had no use.
more or less, and then,
Mm,
Eternal Flame was a reason to do it with uh, Chimera Charmer, Badger type of thing, but it didn't really take off even as much though until Paladin. And part of the reason too, I think, is that it is a free card where you're already playing an expensive knight, and it virtually guarantees you, like, unless someone is playing a 3 night start with, some hard removal to like a fester, where they can really pressure your paladin. uh there's nothing that stops the paladin getting its value, basically, right? Like, it's
yeah,
gonna get it against all of the twos, 1 attack, 0 attacks. It's always getting something. So yeah, it's pretty crazy. I do expect we will see a lot of it in the collection. And so I guess the question, well, we can go down that road, but I'm going to be interested in seeing what you think the meta is going to be for the collection, and maybe we'll take some friendly bets, or at least we'll take like a top 5 list of what we think we're going to see, and then we can look
yeah.
back on it whenever it's done in a month or two.
I'm really interested to see, because there's currently an LKA running that's I just got bounced out of the quarterfinals. Sorry, the semi-final for that. So I
Mm,
finished top 4. I can't say anything about the deck that I played against because Redentor is in the final. Congrats to him. And I'm really curious to see what happens in that final and what the other decks are that got there.
right.
I think I can, yeah, I'm not sure. I can't really talk too much about that. But what basically I'm really curious to see if there's like a really funky deck with illusion cards in it that makes its way into collection and does really well. There could be something really new and different. But what I want to do today is look at some past competitive decks,
Okay.
some past LKAs, the stuff that is on the wiki for the tournament results, as
Sure.
well as we could potentially look at some decks from the one and done, though it's a little different because those decks are not like the most tuned versions of those archetypes. They still represent some powerful deck builds, and kind of guess and just say like discuss, okay, what do we think people might run, what could you run and be successful with right now in the collection.
Yeah. Well, it's especially interesting because I remember it wasn't last year. It would have been the year before when Brankus first came into the competitive scene, and he was pretty new. And then he just asked, he's like, "Okay, what's the good meta
Hmm.
deck?" And people said, "Oh, you know, Brennan Byrne at the time, I think." And he made it to the finals or the semis, and it was like as a rookie, and it was just like, yeah, you know, if you just want to
Hmm.
play good stuff, it's the same thing with Kyle at Gen Con. You know, you just took Brian's Dragon Demona deck and did really well, made whatever it was, top six, I think. So you know, the the mountain, I guess, of games now and styles of decks has sort of established known good stuff to a degree where, you know, and all the resources that we've built up, you know, the wiki, the Ashes live, just having more decks, people recommending, like we've sort of narrowed it down so that it's a little more digestible as a new player. I'm just trying to
Definitely.
find, thankfully it has a little thing here, tournament results, so that we can look over what's been going on, because I have really not had my nose to the ground in a couple months now. I dropped out of first five LKA and Phoenix League for like the last, I don't know, 2 months.
Okay.
So I'm really not up
Bit rusty.
on what's going on. Yeah, which should make the collection an absolute disaster for me.
That's yeah. I have no idea what I'm gonna run yet. I guess you don't have to say like what you're gonna run. Obviously, I do want to also talk about closed list, open list. I think that's really interesting
Mm-hmm.
as well. A discussion that is being had. Maybe I think I saw some discussion. Ultimately, it's to do with what Carl decides to go with, but he's gonna decide to do whatever he thinks is the most fun for everyone for sure. Um, yeah. I mean, like, do you have any idea what you're gonna run for collection?
Not really. I think I have an inclination, but it's probably more recency bias. Um, and then it'll definitely get into the terrible mind games of me trying to anticipate what's going to be played, and then if I can pick
Hmm.
a counter meta pick, and then yeah, I just don't even think I'll get enough reps of any deck in before
Yeah,
we have to submit them in, what is it, 7 days in by next week, right? Or is it five? Is it
something
by the
like that.
15th or the 17th? Yeah. So
I better
it
check.
it's gonna be a wing it and hope I can not embarrass myself.
So here's
But
what I think we should do here. I think we should go down our
yeah.
list of competitive of like winners, as well as any other decks that we can identify from these top fours
Mm-hmm.
from these tournaments. And I want to see like I want to basically get a litmus test on, do we think that this deck can perform well in this meta in collection 2024,
Mm-hmm.
or is this like a weird deck that did well in this tournament that's probably a bad choice. And obviously, we're being like super judgmental in a way that's probably like completely inaccurate, but it's going to be great fun. And we'll see. Just have a look and see what we think. Can these decks hold up? And then I really want to look at some of the decks once we do this from the last year's collection and see
Ooh.
like
Okay.
um have enough cards been released since then that really changes the winners of that collection and what people brought. So we're starting here with LKA, the most recent one in July. Brian B won
Yep.
with a Paladin deck. I wanted to talk about something else, but we're going to start with Paladin.
You can't escape
The
the
most
Paladin,
recent.
especially because July was around the time where Divine
Yeah.
was announced.
Let's
Surprise,
have a look.
surprise!
Let's have a look.
Royal Paladin. So I have
Royal
it up
Paladin.
on screen. I hope that is big enough for people. I can zoom in, I think, a little bit.
Okay, I think
Should
we've got
be.
some people in chat chatting here. Let's
Yeah,
see
we
some
got
comments.
Fritzy. Fritzy joined in. He says he thinks it's leaning towards open
Open
list.
list.
Um,
That'll be
I
awesome.
guess
That'll be
let
awesome.
maybe we could just talk about that quickly,
Yeah.
because I think it's worth it. Definitely colors how you choose a deck, and what I think can be successful or not, in certain ways. So we haven't had an open list in, I don't even know. I don't think the last year. When was the last Wavesy qualifier? That was last year, I think. I don't think we had it in the spring, and his was the only open list I can remember.
I think actually we could work it out from this by scrolling all the way down.
Scrolling down, yeah, it's been a long
Because
time
it's been a while, that's for sure. Because it's all LKAs
until the
and then these
collection.
tournaments where you can swap your deck around.
Yeah, like Blitz, Phoenix Pods,
Yeah. So
even
yeah,
the
you're right. It was
AIL.
2023.
Yeah,
2023 Winter Open.
the Winter Open. So it's
Uh
been a long time.
for sure. There was a big
And
shift with the Phoenix League itself and an attitude that closed lists basically were more accessible and fun for new players. That was the narrative that I heard
yeah,
and understood as like people, a lot of positive feedback on the Discord of people saying like, yes, I agree. I much prefer closed list. It's less intimidating. And from that perspective, I was like, cool, excellent. If more people are enjoying closed list, then that's just good.
there
What do you think?
there is, because when I joined, Shuffle Bus were all open list. You registered
Yeah.
every tournament. There was a reveal, which was really exciting, and it's something that I hope to do for, if we do open list. I would love to do it for the collection, because that was always really cool. Like a night where you just go through the list, see what everyone's going to play. There's like a lot of anticipation of whether
Yeah.
you guessed correctly or not, for your own lists. However, at the time when I was a new player, it can go both ways. One, if you're new enough and you look at the list, you it might not be influential to how you're going to play the game. You're like, well, I don't really know, so I'm just going to play my thing and hope it works out.
Yeah.
However, it can also, be really stressful, because you're looking at the list, you know who your opponent is for that week. You're going over yourself. You're playing mind games of like, am I going, if he goes this way because he thinks I'm going to go this way, and then I play this instead.
Yeah.
And you get into this really stressful situation, and then you mispick your first five and you lose, and you're like, shoot, I wish I didn't spend that whole week stressed. So it can go both ways.
Yeah.
But now,
Totally.
as the guy, the commentator for our tournaments, I'm really remiss that there's been such a lack of lists and games that I can cover without knowing what's going
Yeah.
on ahead of time. Or with these events where we're like, no spectating is allowed because it's closed list, and spectating would be, which, that's a separate thing, which I don't particularly care for, because like at any in-person event, you would hear people talking, you would be able to walk by the table, see the game that's being played.
Yeah.
Like, that's just sort of the spirit of all card games. So to me, that isn't really information that should be restricted. However, we do it the way we do it, and I would like to see it switch to open for the collection. I think it's like, if you're going to make it the best of the best players, the people who have earned their right to play. It's kind of like that extra twist of like, okay, well, now the pressure's on, because not only do you have to guess right, but then week to week you have that little bit of information, and it's, can you come out the best, right? Like that game we played a few weeks ago. I knew exactly what you were playing. I ended up playing a list that we had created together, so you knew what I was playing, and it was still about, could I overcome the double paladin Odette opening? It was, could you work out how I was going to play my first five? Like, it adds that extra bit of strategy, which I enjoy. So yeah, that's the long and short of it.
Totally. Yeah, pros and cons, I think. Corey says that's Shadowfire, I think, right?
Yeah.
a bit. His deck is a bit off the wall, hoping that it goes well, but won't say more until the deck gets revealed. Treatment is doing next week. Yeah, so we might have the chance to reveal all his decks. We just talked about that, and that would be really cool. It might
Mhm.
still be closed list. I'm not sure. It is leaning. It does seem to be potentially open list, so we could do that discussion. That would be really cool. I would love to do that if that's part of if we can schedule that to happen. I do think that the closed list it takes a as you say it takes away a lot of the stress, and it also allows decks to succeed in ways that they can't if you see it coming. That's for
Mhm.
sure, like a big part of it. I know, like under Rug Swept, he sometimes plays his Phoenix League games without spectators allowed because he's going to test out something, and then he will play that in a tournament, in a closed list tournament, and really surprise people. And part of that is like, oh, that's a bit like, oh, this deck wouldn't work if you weren't
Yeah.
tricking me with your ridiculous, like a cheese strat or something like that. But at the same time, it's a reward for creativity. So something, you can play a deck, really catch people off guard, and I think that's cool as well. So I can see it's all pros and cons. Fritz says he never played in an open list tournament, so it'll be interesting to experience for the first time in collection if that's what it is. Yeah, definitely. It's I played in open tournaments a while ago, and my experience was I definitely feel like it was a big learning tool
Mhm.
because even though I did badly, so someone would beat me in a way that I could definitely digest and understand why I had lost, rather than it just being like, oh, um, I just brought the wrong deck, or um, this was just always going to be impossible, or things happened and I lost. I'm not really sure why. With the open list, you can definitely have that feeling of like, oh, I could have done better. I could have put that 1x one times card in my deck and had the right tool for the right moment. Um,
It
it definitely
definitely
helps people
it
who put one copy of cards in their deck for sure,
yeah,
right?
yeah, that's what I was going to say. It becomes a format almost of itself where the 1x tools, just for the sake of countering your opponent's possible first five, are much more likely. Whereas when your whole list is hidden, you can do more of the all-in or surprise style things,
Yeah.
because you're not worried about certain. Now, I I don't recall when Vale got. I guess Vale has been changed much later than the previous Open, and that is
Yeah,
something that I think would be a completely different experience, because it used to be
definitely.
you would always expect to have to, like, double removal was a lot more common, not only when Veil existed but when open list games were around, because there were the Hydra lists and things like that that were being played round one, the Realm of the Absurd lists. There was a lot of those types of things where people could go big and fast round one, and so looking at the list, you're like, shoot, well, they're gonna Veil, and then I also need something else. But if they
Yeah,
don't,
your double
and then
removal.
it becomes a Veil, like, okay, well, it's a gambit. If they don't Veil and I choose not to play double removal, then I'm usually only on 3 units or 3 books or something like that. Am I way behind the 8 ball? And it's a much different feeling to preparing for these things. So with the Veil removed, I think you have more freedom, or like, I'm not too worried about if they go all in on a big unit, as long as I have one card. Of course, if you're not playing a deck with any removal, that's probably a mistake in the first place. Unless you're going to go
Yeah,
really aggressive. But yeah, there's pros and cons to every archetype, and I think it's more of a personal decision whether you deal with the stress, whether you care about researching your opponent, or you're just like, look, these are my first 4 cards. I have one flex. I'm just gonna pick the best case scenario and then go with it. And then you play in game. That's when you have your where is it? I'm pointing off camera. You have your lists on the side, so you can see, like, okay, now I know that
yeah,
they have played all 3 of these, or, oh, you can't hide like a tool of ice trap and get the person worried that you have a third or a veil. They just know. They're like, that's done. I'm not threatened by that
Yeah.
anymore.
In some ways, that could be slightly more accessible to a new player. All you have to do is look at the list of cards. You can look at their discard, and you can try and predict what they might have in their hand. That's something you
Mm-hmm.
can do in closed list when you're experienced and you know, like, oh, with these dice, they could have any of these cards from the entire card pool. I've
Mm-hmm.
seen two Fate Reflections in the discard, but I have no idea if they have the third or any other like time dice power
Mm-hmm.
abilities. They could have anything. In the open list, it was, if the first five is like insane in terms of what it is they could bring once they choose their cards, but it's a lot easier to predict what cards they might have in their hand in runs 2 and onwards. So in some
Yeah.
ways that's easier for a less experienced player, or for someone who's worse at guessing things. It's
Yes.
easier with open list.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Especially if they are running a one of die, and you're like, what's that
Yeah.
die for? Like, I'm not sure.
What's
They
the four?
probably are only running at most 3 cards in that thing, but there's so many cards now, it's a lot harder. So yeah, very. I'm hoping it is open, because mainly I would just like to commentate more of the matches instead of waiting
Shadowfire
until
says
final cut.
that Carl's saying it is going to be open list in pods.
Okay.
So
We'll
there
see.
you
Well, yeah, I'm not always up to date on what Carl says, but
go.
that would be cool. That would be very cool.
You're not always up to date on what Carl says. That's why you're no good at Ashes.
Yeah, I know.
You have to
I have to
be
follow what the man
religiously.
says.
Yes, exactly. The hot takes must continue.
All right, so let's go.
Let's have a look at this deck.
Yeah, let's look at this deck. Let me pull it back up. So it was an Odette Royal Paladin deck. 4 colors: ceremonial, nature, charm, divine, and it was running flex books. So Shimmy, Frostback Bear, and Adaptodon. So I would assume that the flex is playing either the Adaptodon or the Frostback Bear. It's just a lot of good stuff. Like, it's got so much removal, it's insane. Fork Lightning, Regress, Sword of Virtue, and then it's got 10 fairly good allies. Like, there's the Tamer, the Hammer Knight, 2 Old Salts, and the Paladin. And then you've got Recursion in the form of 1 Shepherd. Rose Gardener, 1 of, which is interesting. I think that's probably a tech piece against certain decks. And and then a little bit of extra punch and survival with the Will to Survive. And then 3 Ice Traps, 2 Veils, and a Redirect. So very solid list. Odette's always been solid. And the difference, like, I mean, at Gen Con it was 2 Odette lists versus each other. And so it's always about who sort of either draws better or doesn't make any mistakes.
This is the Paladin deck that in my mind is like now established as the sort of classically best Paladin. It's got the Regress, it's got the Royal Charm, it's got the Paladin, a lot of combinations of things that then I think work really well in Odette. I'd seen that combination of those cards in different Phoenixborn, and comboing it with Odette means that you've got even more removal for specific 2 life units that might be particularly problematic. It means that the Regress doubles up for the Enter the Fray. So even if you're not using the Paladin with the Regress still gets you value whenever you take something out. I'm not sure about the armor, honestly, in terms of the value that you get. And does this list actually have the armor? Or does this
No? This is 3 virtues.
3 sort of virtue. Okay, well that makes sense because you can already use Regress with Enter the Fray if you're worried about losing too much life from that ability. And the 3 of sort of virtue is interesting. The only question for me in my mind with this list is it better in a different Phoenixborn? Because I'm not sure Odette is exactly necessary for this combination of Spellboard and Paladin to work really well. And it does this deck get better by swapping out something to combo with Prowler?
I don't See, so Prowler is good in Odette, and really any, I think, 5 or lower battlefields. Prowler is always a good choice. Um,
Hmm.
and Prowler definitely synergizes with Royal Charm, because you can buff it and then destroy, like, or deal 3 damage to something that's 2 attack. But the list is very clean as is, and
Yeah.
introducing a 4th color for the sake of Prowler then would
Yeah, you would have to
necessitate
swap out
more
something else.
changes.
Yeah.
So
You would have to swap
that,
out nature.
yeah, or yeah, you'd probably have to swap out nature, which then loses you the 2 hammer knights, uh, and will to survive, and the ice
Hmm.
traps. And it
Yeah.
seems like, if I think about Odette and dealing 2 damage, ideally you're dealing it against a big threat, and those would be the 3/2s, right? But then it's like, oh, I don't want to take 3 damage. So yes, you could use regress if you have it, but it's a lot nicer if you can just ice trap it right away, and then you
Yeah.
focus your enter the fray, on either O2s or even just 2/2s, which are the only other thing that would stop Frostback Bear. In terms of that, the Adaptodon, if if you think you're facing weenies, takes care of the 1/2s, so you're not taking damage, but you can easily ping them away. And
Mhm.
the Paladin, of course, is then always there to take down either the big knights with the regress. You have Sword of Virtue to take down the big knights, or you just take out a weenie and it's a big body, that sits there, which you can use Sword of Virtue to refresh. So I don't think this list needs really any changes.
So you're giving it a big thumbs up for collection. You think if you ran this list in collection 2024, you could do all right?
I think I could, with reps. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
the only tricky
We're
part
assuming that.
is and this is where it becomes interesting. In a closed list, I think this is actually harder to play
Yeah.
because you have to decide blindly whether you're playing Adaptodon or Bear.
Yep.
Um, if you see an open list, you know whether your opponent has mostly one lifers or bigger things, and you can choose to
Hmm.
play those. And that's the main decision point in this game. And then you also know if and when you'll ever need to play regress, and that's a huge deal. And your opponent, like if I'm looking at this list and I'm like this sucks. Like they have 3 veils, or sorry, three ice traps and 2 veils. How the heck am I going to remove all of this beef? Like how do I play against this list? This is very tricky. So yeah, this list would, probably make me worry. It's also a list that I think if you are playing in the collection, you should look at and be like, because this is like sort of uh, stereotypical good stuff, and it's obviously a winning deck, and there's a lot of components that are going to be seen. So it's like, can you beat this list with your deck? If you can't,
Hmm.
if you're going to struggle against this, you might have a hard time in the collection, because I assume at least one person's going to run this or something very, very similar.
Okay, so we got some comments. Shadowfire says, I choose blindly all the time, shipment. Got him.
Got him.
Got him again. Carl says, I'm 17 minutes behind the stream, but it is open list to encourage spectating throughout. So we got that confirmation from Carl. Open list. Does that change what you're saying? So you're saying this deck is actually going to do well in open list. I do think with open list, you can run a few more one-ofs in this. I think if you saw someone like Brian running it back with this list, you would perhaps see something like Nature's Wrath, 1x slotted in,
Or one of
something like that. You might see, maybe you don't need the Fester for the ping Fester. I don't know. Just there's some classic slots that you might think about there. I think, yeah, I definitely give this one a thumbs up as well. I think we can safely say Paladin is a force to be reckoned with. Let's move on to the next deck, because I think it'll be more interesting from here for sure.
Sure, this is my deck is more interesting than Brian's.
No, I was going to go down to the next tournament.
Just the top ones, because yours is a Saria Mill deck.
Oh, well, I was gonna take
we'll
a big crap all over that second place deck.
Okay.
So definitely, if we wanted to do that,
Just just as a curiosity, just for the sake
yeah,
of this, because Carl came in third with a what was labeled as a paladin deck, but then
also paladin
Odette,
deck.
because Matt's Odette is going to be very different. His is spin down.
His is always spin down,
Yeah, there's always
but
what
Matt,
oh
there's always
no,
there's always a tiny
he
bit of spin down.
he removed it. So this
Wait,
is
hang on.
yeah no. So it says server error report thing. You know what I think?
Yes,
This is why I had another account on Ashes.
I have it.
Oh,
I have
the global
I
account
have it.
where we can copy. Oh, did it just not work for me?
Uh, I don't know. I paste it into Discord. Whenever I click the link on for Carl to find it,
Maybe
if
just a
you're
sec.
less than three, you might as well just flee.
Okay, that there we go. Oh yeah, yeah, no, not that deck. I was talking about Matt's deck. Um,
Oh,
the
Matt's deck.
Mac it
Yeah,
works
I have
now.
Matt's deck
It
as
was
well. Odette Normal Dreams.
yes, it was some sort of weird Ashes server error. All right, so here
Okay.
is another Royal Charm Shimmerwing Paladin deck, which
Yes.
is sort of the I guess the classic shell now. We're also seeing Fork Lightnings and Veils. I remember this deck. It is a pain, but in a different way because instead of Enter the Fray, you're facing Raven, which is similar for killing off the X2s, but then it's also a body and a quick strike body at that, which
Yeah.
makes it really irritating. And then there's the backup mill component to this with the three farewells and the cobras. Um, and
I
this,
think
yeah, this is a problem. This is another deck that I would hate to face.
I would feel a lot better about facing this, especially in an open list, simply because I think that the Seaside Raven has a lot of weak points. I think the whole point of this deck is that you can sequence it in such a way that they're really in trouble. They either get eaten by the Raven or they get killed by the Paladin. And obviously, Carl's master of sequencing, so he'll make the deck sing. In terms of if I'm looking at this deck and comparing it to the other Paladin deck, I feel like this deck has a better plan B in terms of if the game just starts to slow down and you get stuck in a prison, this deck can mill pretty well with the Cobra with Farewell. It's definitely got like a backup plan, but
Right.
I think that the battlefield dominate plan is not quite as strong here. If you can sequence your way around the Seaside Raven, because you don't have the regress, so like I can just immediately play a knight against this list, and I think I'm okay. Like I think I'm doing well. I'm not sure. I mean,
Other
Carl can
than
definitely jump in and tell me I'm an idiot.
I mean the two issues at least for a knight are
Yeah,
the willpower,
that's
which
true.
could just nuke a knight right away. At least
Can you
if you
flex
play
in
it
a
early.
willpower as a first five in this deck? I don't think you can.
One, two, three, four, five. Maybe not, but I'm not sure. But but that's at least that's a threat. And then of
Yep.
course there's the paladin itself, which can pressure, and then the raven, because there's the royal charm, can also pressure, right? So there's still
Yeah.
threats, but yeah, you might be able at least round one to sit a knight easier than against the Odette list. Um, Weenies, I think, if you're playing a smaller, lower to the ground deck, it's going to have a harder time here. Because how do you deal with this much small
Yeah.
removal as well as
Totally.
like even just a tamer farewell, those things it really adds up to a good second, like a plan B or backup mill plan. Fritz just quickly was saying that a 1x shroud might be a necessary flex. I don't know if you were talking, Fritz, about this deck or for Brian's deck or just in general. But I do think, and I've said this a few times, that Shroud is potentially undervalued, at least depending, like in certain decks where you really want to play things like creepers or otherwise, and you expect that quick removal, and you can guarantee or mirror spirits where you want to get that first swing out, and then you don't
Yep.
care if that unit dies afterwards. That's where I think Shroud really sings. But yeah, so that's an interesting deck. And then, well, you can never. I don't. I don't know if you can ever learn anything from Matt's decks. It's kind of like Red King. It's like in the in the beholder, it works magic, and looking at it, you're like, I could probably beat this. And then because Matt is just so good at sequencing, first
Yeah.
fiving, and just in general, playing the game, that's what makes this very frustrating. And this has a spicy body inversion in there, which is interesting with Enter the Fray. This has Realm Walkers. Like, the game has now developed to the point where you cannot design something to beat everything. I don't think the
Hmm.
range of viable decks 3 years ago was much narrower, and now I think there's so many different things. I think there are a couple players like yourself or Under Rug, Matt, who play just outside of the stereotypes or the archetypes, where
Hmm.
it throws in that extra twist of like, if I was planning to beat, you know, Brian's Odette deck, and then all of a sudden I face Matt's Odette deck, I don't think the solution to these decks is the same, right?
I think Matt is definitely a very different deck builder from myself and Underswept Rug. If you
That's what
look
I
at
meant.
how
Like,
many
you're
copies of
all
cards there
different.
are in a Matt deck.
Yeah.
Oh right, yeah, they're all very different.
Yeah.
I see what you mean. Yeah, totally. Because like every time I look at Matt Barr's deck, it's one of. And yeah, it's a lot harder to work out what's going on. This is some kind of spin down battlefield control deck. I think there's always some element of spin down in Matt's decks. I mean, I say always, that's not true, but there's quite often some sort of plan B that's very subtle.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's always really cool. Carl does the same thing. Ruby Cobra, I remember sort of anecdotally, was like the card that I always saw Carl stick in his deck
Yeah.
as like there's no other mill, just the Ruby Cobra, and that can sometimes just be enough to close out these games you otherwise wouldn't be able to win. Yeah, I don't know about this deck. I don't know about the other Saria as like, oh, this is really a really solid choice. That's like goes beyond in power level just your own ability to play your own deck really well.
Sure.
Um, Interestingly, Fritz is saying, okay, yeah, the Shroud would be for the Raven in the
Mm.
context of protection against Ice Trap,
Yeah.
and then Shadowfire says, the thing I was saying. Basically, you can't do the Raven and the Willpower, so the Knight is probably safe
Yeah. I
in that context.
didn't even think about playing the book, but I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
I think I have seen, and it always seems to be, Carl or Brian draw off either the Shimmerwing or forget what her ability is called. What's Heart's Pull, off of Heart's Pull, and then drawing the other unit.
Yeah.
But yeah, um, yeah. No, I
I think
wasn't
your
saying
body
that. Like,
inversion is yeah. No, go ahead.
I wasn't saying that you and Underrug and Matt play the same style of decks. I meant in the sense of like Brian and Carl, for instance, they play very similar decks. They play very similar style of decks. They play sometimes the exact same decks with only a couple swaps because they play against each other so often. And they also have, I think, a similar value in what is good, like whether it's the Rin deck or the Odette deck or sorry, or whatever it happens to be. Those are like, you could count on those just being very similar, very solid. You can almost expect that one of their 5, 10, 15 decks, you're like, I could see you playing this. Whereas I think if I was to play in a tournament or a pod where I'm with you, Underrug, and Matt, I'm like,
Gotcha.
I can't pick one deck that I think is going to beat all three of you, because I think I'm going to get three completely different looks where they're just outside of what I would expect. like you said, Underrug he plays a lot of surprise stuff, and then it's like, well, if I tailor my deck to what I expect here, I'm getting completely blown out, you know, on this side from a completely different style of deck. And we've seen, Underrug, like what was the one and done tournament, right? That was a good example of seeing so many different styles that were not all control styles, or that Carl might play. They weren't all mill or burn. You get a fallen on one side, you get mag Hydra deck on another. You just get all these mixes of things. So that was what I was referring to.
Oh yeah, I think it definitely challenges different parts. I think I'm excited for another bigger tournament where a deck has to face off against a whole bunch of decks, because as much as you say, oh, you can't beat everything, I feel like so there's some of those older tournaments were a real test of a deck's ability to play against a whole bunch of different decks.
Right.
There could be a matchup out there that just completely destroys it, but there you see, oh, like it beat like 5 different very good decks. To win the collection with the deck you pick, you're gonna have to beat, I don't know how many people, probably 5, I want to say, at least.
Yeah, if we do pods of 4, that's at least 3 people plus a top cut and then a final, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Maybe even one extra round, so 5 to 6 people.
So you definitely can't have too many weaknesses for sure, especially like you might just come up against it in top cut. I think some of these LKAs, you can look at the finalist and be like, okay, they had to beat like a few pretty powerful good decks, but there can also be some decks in there. And I'm thinking of my own that are just sort of get some matchups and do well, or and aren't necessarily that powerful. Well, we can look at, I mean, we did all the other decks. We can look at Mysaria, removal mill, as it's called, and just be like, look at all these times 3s, look at all these times 2s. This is my deck's building style, otherwise known as,
and then we'll look
bad.
Well, bad. You come in second place here. But again, interesting. Like, so you had a Donnie, Frostback Bear, and Cobra, right? Like, we're seeing again similar. This for me, I don't know what it is. It's like I have a mental block of playing only 6 allies or fewer. Like, I've seen Maoni lists where they only run 1 or 2, and I just think to myself, I can't do it. Like, as soon as I lose my conjurations because I'm terrible at sequencing, what do? I get a bad draw, I'm screwed. And on top of that, for 3 of those to be Imperial Ninjas, which is not the typical card you see.
Come
on. But yeah, this has a ton of removal. I mean, just 11 plus 3, at least. Well,
my decks are
half the deck is removal.
It's basically a gimmick, and it works quite well, but I'm not sure. I think a gimmick is the most exploitable kind of deck you could bring to collection. The gimmick here is I just remove everything, which is unbelievably fun. If you want to have fun, play this deck. You will remove everything your opponent plays. You might still lose, but you will just annoy them a lot. I think this deck has big sequencing problems. If you play your opponent can exploit the sequencing of the Raven. They can just play Ice Trap, but they can also just like every single one of these summons can be very exploitable. And as you say, like if I ran this in collection, you would just look at this and you'd be like, oh, I know every single card they're going to play in the first 5. They're going to play all these summon books because they have to, because as you say, there are 6 allies otherwise in this deck. Yep. And yeah, it just becomes very, very difficult to sequence as I discovered in the final, for sure.
Against, still very good, still very cool, and something that I think with perhaps few changes could be more flexible or be able to face a broader range of things.
We have to be judgmental. We have to give these thumbs up or thumbs down. So
all right, thumbs down,
because this is the fun part. Thumbs down. Okay. Thumbs down. What about the Carl Paladin? What are we saying?
Carl Paladin, because I've seen it and faced it, I give a thumbs up.
You give it a thumbs up. I'm giving it a thumbs down.
Oh,
What do
okay.
you
There you
think
go.
about what do you think the M bars, Odette?
All right. If I'm looking at the deck, and this would be much better if I didn't know who was behind it, because I think that
Yeah.
definitely influences. If I just saw that deck, I'd be like, yeah, like it's okay. But I'd say probably like if I'm really worried about it, thumbs down.
I'm very tempted to give it a thumbs up just because I feel like it has a lot of different tools in it for different situations. I don't really understand exactly how you would play this deck, but I know that the more I think about it, the more I'm like, yeah, I think I get it. You're trying to control the battlefield. You spin down. You've got a lot of tools for different situations. You've got removal. You've got um, the body inversion to play against the O2s that your opponent might have, and then you've got Dream Fracture, and you can slot a lot of things. So I'm giving it a thumbs down. I don't think it's good. I don't know. I'm just being deliberately dramatic, but I think we should move on to the
Yeah.
next
Well,
tournament. And I'm not sure we have time to look at every single person. So I think
no,
we
we
should
won't.
start looking at top two uh, of these decks.
Well, even just I think looking at what we think we're going to see. I might
Yeah.
because we've
Okay,
seen
that's
a
fair.
few mill decks. There's at least one or two other archetypes that I think we'll see, and then we can make a
Yeah.
list too of the predictions because I don't want to go to 2 hours this time, like maybe an hour and a half at
Yeah.
the
Okay.
most.
Let's
So
go to EB Fritz's Demona Dragon Aggro.
this I'm assuming we will see at least one player. Like if we're assuming 16 people ish,
Yeah.
16 to 20 people playing, which is half to all of our active competitive players. This is going to be at least one of the decks or a variant of this. This is very much in Fritz's style of
Yes.
aggressive, the color spread as well as the units. It's much more of the all in fast Demona, I would say.
Yes.
As opposed to a fallen Demona like Underrug played. And
Yep.
the Lightbringer especially signifies that sort of counter punch, drag them out, and then just go for it. This was also at a time, I guess, before Molten Gold was banned, so that would have been
Yes.
the other part, which now has to change. But I don't think that really changes the deck that much, or changes the power of the deck. You might have to have one or two flexes to slow things down. It could also, I think, like switching out Molten Gold for some hard removal like Fester would be a really good switch. Um, and or like an ice trap as well if you're just switching out simple nature for nature cards.
I think
Uh,
this deck might need some removal
yeah.
to make it in collection. One of the ways that you counter this deck is you just stick some massive boy in front of everything that's coming your way. Now, you do have the problem of the mount, the Imperial mount, I think it's called.
Empyrean.
Oh, Empyrean, thank you.
Yeah.
It will just block whatever you put out, whatever big knight you put out, and then the dragon gets to hit your face at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Or it doesn't block, sorry, it forces you to block it, and then it sort of matches up in the combat.
Yep.
So that the deck also gets hit by the Molten Gold ban, so you definitely swap out the nature. You probably just run more divine, more ceremony instead of swapping in a fourth color there, in my opinion. I think this deck is amazing. I think this deck is very scary. I think this is all. Sometimes you see a deck do well, and you think, oh, like, oh, there's a better version of this that's gonna be like honed. Whenever I see this deck, I think, is there actually a better version of this? Because I know Brian. People are talking about Brian's lists, Brian's dragon lists, and I'm not sure that they are that different or that much better.
Yeah, I don't
I,
really
I,
recall the differences.
yeah. So I think like you can play this with Paladin. There's one of Paladin in this list. I don't think that works out too well as a first five for Paladin, where you like start with all like a lot more bodies and you sort of flex in the dragon a bit more.
Right.
I think the all-in aggro plan of just aggro, and then you just do the burn finisher. It worked really well in this tournament.
Mm-hmm.
I think Fritz is literally the in chat that made this.
Yeah, he
So
is.
I'm interested. Brian relies on chance more, so maybe like chance of transfusion or
Yes,
revenge.
to keep
Interesting.
the dragon or the Empyrean alive, as well as remove chump blockers.
The problem
Um,
is, does this deck just get countered? Like if you know, you see this in your in collection, your opponent is it's Fritz. He's running it back. I don't know. It's someone else who's taking this deck and is just going all out with dragon aggro. Can you just first five some beefy units that can't be taken out by the dragon, don't get taken out by like the double swordsman? Like you just run two knights into this list, right?
well, and then you just get pulled out by the Lightbringer.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
true.
so that's why I'm saying this list, because Molten Gold is going to come out, you could easily slot Fester and
Yeah.
um, and one Ice Trap as a flex starter, uh, and that makes this list a lot harder to deal with. If you saw it, you're like, shoot, is he going to run Ping Fester? Is he going to just pressure my guard with the Light Swordsman and then
Yeah.
do whatever? So there's a lot more to this list than what we're looking at now, just because of that consideration. But it's kind
Yeah.
of like when Brennan was at the peak, or when Hope Creepers was at the peak. You knew what was coming, even if it wasn't, if it was closed list. You knew as soon as you saw the dice spread, as soon as you saw Hope or Brennan, you're like, shoot. And the question was, do you have a game plan for it? Do you have a first five that counters it? And I think this list is necessary to prepare for, but it's also just, even if you know what's coming, it's really hard to deal with. And you hope that either what you first five or what you have as a flex can be sequenced to remove enough or to slow it down enough that you can counterpunch, right? Because you have to, it's a race. This
Mm.
game is a race.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the one spice that I really like is the adrenaline rush. I don't know if I would run
Oh,
personally three of them,
100%.
but
I agree.
the consideration of like, oh, I faced dragon, I tanked it once, and then it just comes at you again. It's like, this is the worst. This is a good
Yeah,
list, and
totally.
something
Oh,
that
it's
you
good.
should keep in mind if you're preparing for the collection.
I agree. Fritz says this list was made with a lot of testing against his list, meaning Brian's dragon list. That's really interesting. Dragon against dragon. That's all about the sequencing. Sounds like a really freaky matchup. And then Shadowfire says, almost positive that I versus a new version of this list last night barely won because he first fived correctly, and honestly, that is probably Dragon's main weakness. Yeah, and I agree, and this is why I give Domino Dragon a thumbs down
I give it a
because
thumbs
I
up.
agree with you. Give it a thumbs up.
Yeah.
You're wrong. I think that the reason that this deck is in trouble is specifically because of open list, specifically because you can first five into it. And I think that if you ran this deck list in collection, you could prove me wrong and win the tournament. I think you could definitely make top 8, make top 5, like make the cut. I think you could do really well. And I think you would have such a hard time against like the other best deck in the tournament, because I think if you can work out how to beat this deck, unlike Paladin and unlike some other decks that I think, in my opinion, you can just dismantle this, in my opinion.
All right. So, Fritz. One pathetic loser.
I said the deck was amazing.
Yeah. Thumbs down. All right. So there's one more style, actually two more styles I want to look at. One, which is going to be a burn list, because we haven't talked about burn, and there's two choices here. There's your burn, the Astria burn, or the Jessa burn. We've already talked about one of your lists, so for the sake of it, let's go with the Branca's burn list. And then I was also thinking about one could be interesting as the Shadowhound book, or a Spin Down Fatigue
Definitely.
book, because we haven't, we sort of looked at Matt's list, but I think there might be more strict versions of that. So you can let me know what you want to take a look at. But Craig Levine was the last card regressed there. The last card could be regressed. That would actually, I think, be an easy swap in for that list to
Hmm.
handle the bigger knights. Fester is an option, but if you're already running Paladin, regress is as an easy option there. So this is Brancus's dual monk burn, and
Hmm.
the standard is a double knight open with both monks and then ritualist for the chant of revenge. And it's really just, again, this was pre Molten Gold ban, but unlike perhaps the other list, which needed to race and finish more, I think Jessa has long term burn capability, and you could easily slot other things here for the Molten Gold.
I think Molten Gold Ban makes Jessa seem a lot better as a burn option than Astria, because the whole point of Astria is that you've got all this other stuff that's burning, and you don't need the screams,
Mm-hmm.
and you can use the control tools instead. And I think that the whole point of Jessa is that you almost don't need the burn as much because you can scream. And so if Molten Gold's banned, it makes sense to me. Jessa becomes a lot better of an option in the general scheme of things between what are two pretty similar approaches to winning a matchup.
Yeah, for sure. Sorry, I don't know if this list is big enough for people. It's just kind of like this is one of those lists that is classic and has not
Yeah.
changed in many years. The main change, other than the Molten Gold ban, is that Ritualist and Old Salt came around last year
Yeah.
and made this style of deck even better because now you could tutor for Chant of Revenge. But it's still a clock. It's a very flexible long term clock. The Three Fears is really good, especially with Butterfly Monk and Salamander. Probably Salamander now even more so, just because you also have a chump blocker, which is good to have on a small battlefield. Um, but I mean, the Double Knight Open is nothing to sneeze at, and I would expect to see a Jessa Burn this collection.
I think you would. I think you could definitely sequence Jessa Burn and first five correctly into a bunch of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think you could do it with Astria as well, but the Astria would give you a lot more flexibility with first five. We're kind of talking about an archetype rather than a particular deck, and
Yeah.
it's hard to look at this deck and say this is the one because you would swap out some stuff because of the Molten Gold ban. But I I would feel good about a Jessa Burn list winning collection because I think that this deck can win against almost anything. Like it's hard to win certain matchups, but I don't think I've ever played as Burn and thought, oh, that was just like unwinnable. Like I just couldn't perform. I couldn't do anything uh, in that. Sometimes I feel like I was unlucky, and you don't draw the right cards, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe that would be what would happen here even more with the gold ban. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I mean, you have to be able to either remove or stall like an extra round, I would say.
Yeah.
Right? That's realistic 3 to 9 reach gives you another round where you're like, oh, I have to have some units on the board. So I could see pushing up the allies by another one, knight, perhaps, another hunt master, another hammer knight. And then it's already got the geist traps, it's already got fear, it's got choke. You
Yeah.
could easily add almost anything based off of what you think the meta is going to be. So I'm not. Yeah, I again, I think this is a list to expect, and I think it's just a good list against any matchup. Like you said, it's always got a shot. So,
Do
are
you
you gonna
think
give it a
Jessa
thumbs
Byrne
down?
would need to lean into charge? I always say like great things about a deck and
Yeah.
then give it a thumbs down. It's great. It's so I feel so powerful. Do you think Jessa Byrne would need to lean towards charm or sympathy? That's really interesting. I think that that is almost impossible to answer in this. I was like sitting down and actually making a deck. The charm is really all about the shimmer wing. I think if you're running charm, you're running
Yeah.
shimmer wing. And then the sympathy allows you access to, in this case, for example, the Salamander Monk. And those are the two big, big book differences. I do think that Huntmaster opening might have come full circle and be a good idea again, just because you're diversifying your investment a lot there in a way that I like, and you can go aggro. A lot of decks are slowing down in their first five.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And it's
I
just
don't know.
more bodies, right, to allow you to delay. I think Shimmerwing, like if we're
It's hard
talking
to
about,
get better than Chevron.
yeah, putting in anything, especially if you're
Yeah.
going into Charm, which still allows you to play Sympathy Pain, that would be the go-to. It's also exactly what Jessa wants, which is just a body, but also the draw for your burn cards, or your allies. So that would be probably a really easy fit, I think. And because you don't need the 4 nature die, you could just swap one of those out, and it would be, I think, pretty straightforward there.
Fritz says Huntmaster and Open List could struggle against Royal Paladin, though. Yeah, I mean, totally. You do not open with Huntmaster. But here's the thing: like Huntmaster Open List against Royal Paladin, if you go first and you play the Huntmaster, your opponent needs to play the Royal Charm, then play something that puts the dice on the Royal Charm, and then play the Paladin. So as
Yep.
much as Royal Charm into Huntmaster can be great, if I'm looking to just play the Huntmaster and then immediately hit my opponent's life total with that attack, it's not necessarily that bad against the Royal Paladin, because Royal Paladin is quite slow.
Yeah, and I mean, if they really wanted to play, like if they're like, oh, I'm really concerned about Huntmaster, and they played just a straight Charm Die Paladin, then you still have the
Oh yeah,
Panther Spirit. Like you could, I would probably first 5 Fear and rework my first 5 a little bit to play against a Paladin deck, just because
yeah.
you have so many chump units to use for Fear target.
Fear into Paladin works nicely, and Paladin, if you can stall against, I think that's also really nice for a slow burn.
Mm-hmm.
With all these decks slowing down, in my opinion, I think we're in quite a slow meta, and so a slow burn like Jessa might be exactly what you need to take out all these Paladin players.
Yeah, yeah, for
Honestly.
sure. All right.
Or
One more.
I give this a thumbs up. I give this a thumbs up. It's going to
Oh,
make some.
shock.
You really need some changes. I know that Ninja gives a burn deck a thumbs up, whatever. But I do think that for sure slow burn is going to work. The only thing I would say maybe thumbs down on is maybe there's a Rymia burn deck list out there that's just much better than any of this.
Yeah. Is there ever an argument to dip into illusion with a deck like this? Yes, there is. Dipping into illusion. So actually, no. I'm going to clarify. Dipping into illusion is, I think, a trickier proposition for this list if you keep the book. Like if you were to say keep the books the same, I think a Jessa Burn where instead of playing Butterfly Monk, you're playing, what's it called, Whisperer.
Mm-hmm.
Then
I was about to say Whisperer.
it gives you more of a reason to dip into two illusion, or sorry, two illusion, swapping out 2 nature, because then you don't have the golds, you don't have the Butterfly Monk, and that opens up some other plays, whether it's removal or stalling things like Figures in the Fog. Opens up Fate Reflection if you think you need that against the meta, or it opens up something like Backflip, where you want to keep recurring Fire Archers and boosting, like a Salamander Monk Spirit, for instance. There's a lot of different things. You could play Prowler instead of Whisper if you thought that was a good play. I just I think that starts to shape the list a little bit differently than what is currently being played. But yes, absolutely, an illusion Jessa burn is completely viable, and I wouldn't be surprised to see something like that either. Okay,
Yeah,
so
I think that would be tricky. You'd really have to test that out, because we haven't really seen that before, basically.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So now you get to pick the last deck. We'll take a look at, and then we have 15 minutes to write down some
Okay.
predictions for the people.
All right, I'm just going to trash my own deck again. I think O2s are in the ditch. I think that with all this sort of like with the paladin and with if somebody brings some crazy like life switching new illusion deck with acrobat or whatever,
This is a
then
Xander
your
deck.
ruby, yeah, the
Yeah,
ruby cobras are all gone. So I think if we look at like mill, I think the best choice for something like that is even is going further back and looking at
oh,
like Brian B's Leo deck maybe.
yeah.
Um
Well, I mean, he brought Leo to Brian B has brought Leo a few times, including to Gen Con. Um, and
yeah.
it's, I mean, you know, Leo is
So
still
I'm giving a
good. Mill's
thumbs
still
down
good.
to that
To your
to
deck?
that Xander.
Okay.
To yeah, for sure.
I agree.
Um
Total garbage deck.
nice. I think the Leo um I think Leo potentially can do the mill because even if you just keep removing the Finch, it doesn't matter because I
Mm,
still get to mill two,
right.
even if you keep body inverting kind of style it or you paladin it. I'm like, cool, nice. You mill two, please. Like I'm still happy enough by
Hmm.
that interaction.
I'm curious. I haven't tried this, and I don't know if I would immediately try it before the collection,
Mhm.
as opposed to just retrying one of my own decks. But is there? There's got to be an illusion version of Leo Mill, uh, perhaps on the Whisper train, where that's like in the same
Mm,
sense that Carl has, sometimes only ever run Ruby Cobra as the only source of mill. And here
yeah.
you naturally have the Finch, and you're like, fine, but that's not a spellboard slot. And so the only other mill card you run is the Whisperer, and then you can play more to the battlefield, knowing that if your two weenie units ever die, you're still moving along a plan B, and then all you have to focus on is having enough beef and removal for your board. So you can sort of play a lot more of an aggro Leo than something like a Turbo Mill or an O2 Swarm type of thing. I'm
Yeah.
curious. I now it makes me want to build after this, but that would be something that I'd be like, that this is almost like an out of left field play where it could still do what you want it to do, but in a completely different look that people aren't prepared for.
I think Whisper definitely can lean into the burn rather than the spin down
Mm-hmm.
from my experience playing it. So I'd almost be more curious by that first deck idea with the like the Jessa spin down. I
Right.
feel like if you play the Leo with the Whisper, you don't necessarily get the spin down that you need.
Hey, buddy. My son just came in the room. Come on.
And yeah, I think Leo is a good shout. I think that Mill is in a good place, just not O2 Mill.
Yeah, right. No,
So
I agree. I think O2s are a little tricky. But I mean, the Flock Shepherd still does work, and it still makes you
it's true.
spend a lot of resources for the cheap units that are coming down. And this list is actually surprisingly less mill focused, because it's got the Master Vampire, it's got the Old Salts, and eventually it leans into the Eternal Flame a lot more. You can say hi to everyone, Mystery Man.
Which camera are you using?
Well, that's to talk to Ninja, and this one's to the people.
Hi, 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 big audience. You want to say hi?
Um, yeah, for sure. So yeah, I don't think well, I wouldn't be surprised if we see this list because I know it works. Um, and I think this is basically his Gen Con list as well. I just don't know if it's the deck you would put first in your thought process of like what's going to win.
Yeah, I was looking at the wording on Ash Spirit there to see if it triggers the from being killed by the paladin. Very sadly, does not. It's only from the attack. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure to give this particular deck a thumbs up because of the Thread Oil and the Shimmer Wing. I think you can rework a Leo deck just a little bit. It's all about the 3x Farewell plus the Finch. And I think that just Charm in general is in a good place with the Rose Gardener Farewell. And I mean, you could maybe argue that like Matt Barr's style deck could work well here, where um, you run lots of 1x's, you run enough charm to run the farewell, and then you just focus the rest of your deck on actually surviving and running the battlefield. I don't know. Yeah, it's a weird one. I think this deck gets a thumbs down from me simply because of all of the O2. This is still just O2. And I'm looking at the other deck list and I'm like, yep, that's all zero attack as well. Zero attack everywhere for Mill.
There you go. Thumbs down for Brian's successful winning list. We've given a lot. We've given a lot of these winners a thumbs down. All right.
Yeah.
So now it's time. Yeah, it's time for us to predict. I don't have a. Well, actually, can I?
I want to give one more thumbs up. I definitely am giving
thumbs up.
Hope. I'm giving Hope Hounds a thumbs up for sure, because I think not being targeted is like has never been better. I think.
So like Carl's list. I can pull it up quickly.
Yeah. Either I think if you go really far back, the Pact Hope Hounds is definitely good enough. Mm-hmm. That's like Brian's list. And then if you go more recent, then Carl's list? Question mark, I think.
Yeah. And Carl's list only has one ally. But yeah, the Ruby Cobra, again, surprise, Shimmerwing, Royal Charm, Shadowhound, and Gilder. So yeah, very different, very intimidating.
Shadowhound O2. Maybe I give that one a thumbs down if I'm to be consistent, and I give the old Brian B Pact a thumbs up. I'm not sure.
All right. Well, we have to. We have to give everyone at least one thumbs down at this point.
Yeah.
Okay. So then,
do you think we'll see Harold given the last year's collection? There's loads of things to talk about. I get the impression that we are wrapping things up quickly here. So
well, yeah, I want
more for next week.
15
more for next time.
Yeah, because we won't have the list yet. No, we will. We'll see. Okay. I don't know when we're gonna do the reveal show. We could probably still push it like a day or two, and then because I think Killer was gonna do it with me. So we still
okay. Oh, I see how it is.
Well, I'm cool to have three or four people. We could have like a real like TV news network. I'll have 4 or 5 people. Everyone's got their opinions. I'll just have to learn how to do graphics and things in a quick minute. Harold, yeah. Okay, so we can get to that now because we just looked at some lists, but let's realistically talk about what we think we're gonna see. So, how about we do this? Each of us gets 5 predictions.
Yeah,
and you have to predict. You have to predict at least, like, let's say whatever. What do you think really makes like an archetype? Like 2 to 3 cards.
Yeah.
Right. Like we obviously know if you're talking about pack deck or whatever. If we're talking about Royal Paladin, that sort of gives it to us. But you have to pick the Phoenixborn and the archetype that we're gonna see, and then we'll see if we get correctly. I think we'll probably be able to at least get 3 right each, but let's see. So you go for it. Number 1. What do you think? We could even do it in order. Like, what do you think's the most common?
Yeah. Most common, I think Odette, Paladin. We can go Royal Charm, Paladin, and Glory Aspirant. That's kind of cheating. Yeah, it's not. It's part of the combo.
Okay. So, So Odette, Royal Charm, Paladin, and I'm just going to do this. Sorry, 1 second. Just for the sake of... All right. I'll put this in a notepad. Paladin... and Glory, you said?
Yeah.
Gloria. All right, so that is one. And I'll put this as ninjas. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, and then maybe this is cheating because in terms of most common, I do actually agree. I think it's going to be Odat Paladin.
Oh.
Yeah, I can't disagree there. So
Okay.
number 2.
Well, you have to go first then, because
Yes,
then I can just agree with you.
All right. Number 2, Demona Dragon, is going to be the start of it. But which variation do I think? I am going to say the Fallen variation, actually. I think Fallen is going to. It's been around the last, 2 months, and I think that's going to be the one that sneaks in.
Okay.
So, Dragon Fallen. So what's
I think. I think we're going to see Rumia burn, which we haven't talked about, but we're just predicting. I think it's going to be Rumia. It's going to be Sympathy Pain, Final Cry.
Okay, so sort of stereotypical burn. Guess at least one spell board, because you only got Final Cry and Sympathy Pain. It's not really. It's kind of like, come on.
I think Ancestral Army. We'll see. Ancestral Army. Okay. A spell board will be
just one.
Ooh,
is it going to be a chant?
I mean, I'm just going to go. Yeah, it's just going to be Chant of Revenge.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So full on, basically like just a burn, but in Rumia.
It'll be classic burn, Rumia, and some funky stuff on top.
Okay. Okay. Actually, I was so confident earlier, and now I'm actually not so sure of what we're going to see. I think I would be shocked if there wasn't a Herald. I don't know that it's going to be the third most common or popular. That's the question, right? Is I could guess maybe one of decks here. I'm just going to pull up Phoenix Born to give myself, because I think there's something we've probably skipped over that would otherwise be very popular that we're just forgetting.
I mean, it's hard to actually predict because people will just play some crazy deck that they came up with, right, that's not archetypal, but we're guessing the archetypes that we've seen before.
Because well, will we see a Mayoni Snake? Are we gonna see
right,
a Cole Wishing Wing? Are we gonna see a Turbo Mill? All right, so yeah, let's just go with a Herald list, but I'm not going to say Pact. I don't think.
Okay.
I think it might be Herald.
It's a Paladin. Come on.
No.
Paladin again.
It's not Paladin.
Paladin again. It's always Paladin.
It's not Paladin. No. Definitely Divine though, and probably Ceremonial. But I wouldn't be surprised if it was Frostback Bear as the board beef, and then Lightbringer. So more of a control style.
We're getting the wrap up.
Also, let your fans know.
Well, let me entertain you all in this moment of silence.
Right. Allie wants you to know that she wasn't sarcastic about her big audience. She loves you all.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yeah. So I don't know what you call, basically battlefield oriented Herald, but not a Pact Herald.
Okay. Not Pact. Okay.
Actually, just for the sake of it, I'll put in Chant of Transfusion though. I think that's more important than the Phoenix Attendant.
Not packed, but chant of
But
transfusion.
Chant of Transfusion, but not Phoenix Attendant. So it's not
Oh,
really
okay,
packed.
we're going
Yeah.
like old school terminology for packed. Okay, okay,
Yeah.
cool.
All right.
All
What's
right.
your third guess?
I got to do one. I'm trying to work out what this is. I think it's Astria, Neil, Safeguard, Neil. No, Neil and something else.
So very prison like.
Yeah, Astria prison. Basically, I'm trying to work out if it's prison burn or prison mill. So I'm trying to like leave myself the option for it to be either, as like a little cheeky. So yeah, we'll go Neil Safeguard, but I'm not particularly confident on the Safeguard. But
Right.
but basically Astria Neil, some kind of prison.
All right, cool.
Oh, I know. Neil Law of Fear. There we go.
Ooh, so not Safeguard, Law of Fear. That's actually
Yeah.
that's a good call. Okay, I like that. All right, so oops, I put the guesses, but I didn't put.
Because I think that package could do some nasty business.
Yeah, Law of Fear is always underplayed, and then you face it, and you're like, this is irritating.
Yeah.
Okay, you take the first crack at it again.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna go for Fallen, Demona, Old Salt, but that's a bit boring. But sure.
Okay, Demona.
I'm not sure what that second card is.
Fallen.
Demona, it's Fallen.
Dragon or no?
Yeah, Dragon's there, but like maybe not even first fiving.
Yeah.
So I think actually Open Memories will go with Fallen, Open Memories, Demona.
Ooh.
You know, we've seen that before.
Yeah. All right. I'm gonna go with what we were covering before. I think that there's going to be a Jessa Burn.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that's gonna be classic. And do I think it's going to be the classic sort of like what we covered, like Brancus's list, or do I think it's going to be different? It'll definitely be Chant of Revenge. I'm gonna call what I expected, which was maybe a little bit more of a left field. I'm gonna call Whisper. I'm gonna say it's a little bit of a different Jessa Burn, with the illusion twist, and maybe let's say Prowler, just for the sake of making this a spicy list. And then the last guess. All right, so I'll start.
I already have a spicy one.
I think we're missing an aggro list here.
Yeah.
And I'm leaning on Koji or Cole, who's always a classic. Do I think Slash Fester is more valuable than like a Wolf Pact type of deal here? I'm going to go with the Koji lists. And is that going to be Creepers? Yeah. Let's say as opposed to a Wishing Wing list. Yeah. I'm going to go Creeper list and Wolf and Gilder. Very classic sort of Koji thing. Probably has a Hunt Master in there too, but yeah, that's gonna be number 5. There's so many lists we haven't covered, like Tristan, Victoria might even make a showing. Symboli, we haven't even seen Symboli.
Symboli for sure. I don't know what a Symboli deck looks like, so I'm not going to try and guess that. I don't know. I have not made a good one so far. I don't think the one we made together. I think the one we made together was okay. Yeah, I'm not going to say it wasn't, but I haven't made one that I think, oh yeah, that's amazing. I think Echo is my last shout. I think someone out there either already has an Echo deck that they think this is going to do really well, or they have something. I'm going to go with Echo. It's going to be Lightbringer Echo, because of course you have to play Lightbringer.
Sure.
And then honestly, it could be like literally anything. I'll go with.
Could be spicy. Could say like Shroud Dogs.
Yeah, I think I'll just go Prowler. I'll go Prowler.
Prowler. All right.
Yeah.
All right. What's your? Let's do one more each. What's your?
One more. Okay.
Yeah, just for the sake of because these are like I think are safe bets. What's your one spicy out of left field pick?
Right. And this is obviously what I guessing. Well, I can't guess the thing that I've played against that I can't talk about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like you don't
So,
have to say I'm guessing what I saw last week or last night or whatever, but no, like
right.
yeah, because who knows what's going to be played.
Yeah. I think the spiciest is probably that I genuinely think could do well is Auric.
Okay.
It's kind of it's probably like Auric, Turtle, Guard, Butterfly Monk, something like that.
So more of a long-term wall,
like a grind Auric. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Um. Just because I said Symboli and then I started thinking about Matt Bowers defending Dark Reflection so much. I'm gonna guess that there's gonna be a Symboli Dark Reflection list. The question is, what is in that list? I'm gonna say that that's a spin down list with.
Definitely has Fate Reflection, right?
It definitely has Fate Reflection.
Yeah.
And I think it's gonna have Dream Fracture as some reach with Whisper. I think it's gonna be.
Okay.
Yeah, just that's gonna be my spicy pick. Do you want to guess who you think's gonna take it all? You can guess yourself too.
No. Yeah. No, I think it is the spirit of competition that should be victorious.
Very good.
Thank you.
All right. So now I have those. Now we have to come back to it, and we'll see how correct.
We'll see. And obviously, if we bring one of the lists, it doesn't count, right?
I need to at least be correct once, so I'm going to bring one of these.
Yeah. So now we know you're going to run one of these four.
These are one of my 5 lists.
You're going to bring Symboli and be like, oh my, I'm a genius.
Who knew the spicy pick is going to work? Yeah, Craig, no problem. Thanks for watching.
Yeah, thanks for hanging out, guys.
This was fun. I'm very curious. I'm also curious as to whether I always wonder if there's any influence whatsoever. Casey, Shmeny, anybody who talks publicly has an influencing. Like if someone was like, "Oh, I didn't think about that." Yeah, now. Or they had a list and they're like, "Oh shoot, my list doesn't beat the Odette Royal Paladin list. I need to change what I was bringing." Like if it's impacted at all the decisions. Yeah, thanks Fritz. Thanks for joining us. So yeah, we'll come back to it. This was fun.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with the collection. It's an exciting time. It's one of those tournaments where, like, even if I get destroyed, that just means I can watch other people be the best. So it's exciting times.
Absolutely. And if you are still watching, don't forget to vote and first nominate, and then we will vote for the various awards: New Player of the Year, Most Improved of the Year, Brankus of the Year, the Auric Gilstream Human of the Year, most something about community involvement, whether you're a commentator, streamer, tournament organizer, whatever it happens to be, article writer, and then best deck builder of the year. So make sure you nominate and vote for those, because those are always one of the most fun things to cover, and it's all in the spirit of this really great community. All right, cool.
All right.
We did it. Ashtalkie. We rebranded, and we had a good rebranded first episode.
Absolutely.
And thanks for joining me. I know it's late on your side, so I'll let you get some sleep.
Go.
All right.
Excellent.
Do you want to sign us off? You got to come up with a new sign off for Ashtalkie.
I gotta know. If you're not Ashtalkie, you're Ashwalkie. No, I don't know.
Workshop that one. That one needs some work.
We need Ali to just come up with something, basically, because she already made up the name of the.
That's true. That's true. I'll talk to her. She'll come up with something clever. All right. Thanks, everyone. If you're not janky, you're Sanky. Frog up, and the rest of them. Have a good night. Ciao.
Good night.